Not even a cold will stop me from doing DIY. Today I'm doing a number of different things around the house, mostly pottering, not very hard DIY, not taking on anything too strenuous, but trying to get some of the little jobs done. One of those jobs is this. Here are my shelves. I still haven't put the varnish on them. This is the varnish that I'm going to use. I'm using this one because this is what I varnished my my office, my spare room cupboards with. I tried quite a few varnishes. This one I just got on with in terms of, I don't know why I'm hiding behind there. I got on with this in terms of how it applies and the finish. So I've bought it ever since. This video is not sponsored by Ronsil, but it could be. Call me. So I'll be doing this afternoon. I'll add a couple of coats, let it dry fully before putting anything back on, because if you put it back on and it's not dry, it will stick, because I've learned the hard way with that as well. Fortunately, this does actually dry quite fast. So that's one job I'm going to do, as well as screwing in these metal plates. Just a 2-minute job, it's going to be very quick. As you can see, I've not changed out my pyjamas. This is the most you're going to get from me today. I have nothing else to give. Where's my slipper? All those things that I just described to you. Yeah, I did none of those things. I did, however, take a nap, and then I spent some time in the park reading a newspaper. I also sorted through this little box. This is something I had delivered in the post. I don't recall if I actually told you about this on one of my recent videos, but I basically found an abandoned shelf on the side of the road. Someone was giving it up, but it was missing a couple of brackets. So I picked up the cheapest version of these brackets that I could. I think this cost me about £12.99, so that I could take 2 of the brackets to use for the shelf. And even after using these 2 brackets, I will still have one small pipe section that I could potentially use for something else. I couldn't screw this on, and I started to worry that perhaps the thread was broken, especially since this other one fit. So I will try this on the shelf and see if it works on there instead. In fact, let's go down and put them on the shelf right now. Oh, there's my slipper. Okay. So this is the shelf. It's actually quite attractive. It's a good shelf. It was just that these 2 brackets were missing, so I can see why they wanted to get rid of it if they weren't too sure how to replace them. But to be honest, even without these brackets, you still could have screwed it onto the wall, but just put less weight onto the shelf. But now I have these, I'm just going to screw them on. I did double check before I bought them that they would be the right size, and everything fit perfectly. All I need to do now is cut it down. It's a little bit too wide to fit into my bathroom in the space that I wanted to put it, which won't take too much time. I wouldn't have thought. Maybe it will. I don't know. Despite this cold, I just had the world's largest pizza and found myself with a second wind. So let's prop you on here. I'm going to go out into the garden and see if we can get some stuff done. I need to clean out my pond filter because the water's coming out very slowly, which means that the filter inside is likely very clogged up. So that's obviously very important. I want my fish to be comfortable, so we're going to do that right now. So here's my pond, and this was the reported trickling water. That should be more of a flow. Can you see any fish? Oh, there's one. I keep my filter over this side. It's actually partially buried in the ground because it keeps it out of the way, and the pump is on the left side, down just below those little rubber duckies. Oh, started by moving stuff out the way. I have to do this because it's tricky to get to. Taking the lid off, it's just because it's wedged in the corner. It's just really fiddly. It's also just not the best filter I've ever used. The lid doesn't really go back on very easily, so you'll see in a minute where I have to fight with it for a really long time to get it to go back on. The top part of the filter that you can see here is plugged in, so this part can't be removed from where it is. I have to take out the big bucket of water underneath. It often gets caught on the lid, so it ends up being a 2-person job that I struggle through all by myself. You're going to love seeing what's inside of here. That's how much waste is in there. That is fish poo, that's rotting flowers and leaves that have fallen from the tree above. And there's lots of little worms that grow naturally in ponds and in pumps like this. They're not dangerous to the fish. In fact, often the fish eat them. But they grow in these pumps and they obviously produce lots of waste, which adds to the waste that needs to be cleaned up. And in the summer, the fish make quite a lot more waste because they're eating more, because they're hungrier. They're more active. There's a few different parts to the filter. There's some very large balls at the bottom which remove some of the largest bits of debris like leaves, etc. A sponge filter, the black one on the left, that has large holes in it for medium bits of debris. And then the green one that picks up all of the fine bits of mush so it doesn't go back in the pond. This is where I have the joy of trying to squeeze it all back in. The lid was actually very dirty, but I decided not to clean it this time. Because the pond is so dirty, I'll have to clean this filter out again really soon anyway. See what I mean? It just never just goes on. It always wants to fight. There's also a rubber band that has to go on in exactly the right spot, otherwise the lid doesn't go back on. As well as cleaning up the filter, I also want to clean out the pump. I try to get it out of the pond as quickly as possible so all of the debris doesn't sneak back into the pond. I also wanted to drag it away from the pond ever so slightly because I'm going to use my watering hose to clean this out. Look how much is in there. That's just so much. Might as well put that in my plants. All that fish poop will act as a fertiliser. I was just saying I'm washing it away from the pond because the fish don't like chlorine and the water that comes out of your hose pipe is filled with chlorine. And because I've washed all of these components with water that contains chlorine, I'll have to treat the pond with some dechlorinator so that the fish don't have to swim in slightly chlorinated water. And if my pump looks a bit furry, that's because there's a type of algae that you get in ponds that's super, super hard to remove once it's in there. This is Aquasafe, this is the dechlorinator that I mentioned. The lid was on so tight for just no reason. I'm also careful when I'm watering the plants around the pond not to get any of my hosepipe water in the pond. Now that the pump and filter is turned back on, it takes a little while for the filter to fill up, because of course I emptied it when I washed it out, so it draws the water from the pond and takes a little while to fill up, which is why the water that's coming out is sort of choking a little bit. This is one of those little worms that I mentioned that lives in the filter. I guess I should wash my hands. There we go. That's better. That's the kind of flow that I wanted. Perfect. Whilst I was sorting the stuff in the pond, I noticed that my potatoes are not growing in this particular bag, which is very strange because I'm sure I saw them. So it's possible when I've added the soil, the potatoes have died off. Little worm just then. So I took out most of the soil and just added in a couple of potato plants I already had growing. And then I got this little surprise out of nowhere. And then, whilst I was sorting the potatoes, I noticed all of my foxgloves that hadn't been planted out. This is how all of my jobs happen. I tried to do one and I noticed something else that hasn't been done yet. Do you do that? Is that how your jobs happen? Do you end up doing none of the stuff that you said you would at the start of the day? So I've never actually grown foxgloves before. I planted these out, last year, start of last year maybe. They must be yearly plants. I plotted them out and they just didn't grow where I had put them. Or rather, they didn't flower, they did grow. So I just stuck them in the greenhouse to see if anything would grow this year, and these beautiful foxgloves grew out of the top. So I'm going to take them out of these nice, spacious pots and I'm going to shove them into this teeny tiny little trough. You might have just seen me wrestling with one of them. There was a smaller plant, a different variety, that I tried to salvage, but it ended up breaking. The roots were too intertwined. So there we go. That would be nice to look out onto from the living room. I tried to match the colours, so the pinks are on the far left and the far right, and the whites on the insides. I do actually get quite a lot of compliments about my garden, maybe from neighbours, but mostly just from passers-by. People who walk by every day and get to enjoy the flowers. And I really like that. I like that other people are able to enjoy them as well. I mustn't forget to give them a drink before I go inside. Threw in the compost a whole bunch of dead leaves that I took off the bottom of the plants. And with the extra little bit of soil I had, I just went ahead and repotted one of these plants that was a little bit root bound. And stood in shock at how much mess I'd made. Oh no. Well, there we go. Another successful day of DIY with a cold, even. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe.